Welcome to the Whistleblower Newsroom. I'm Christina Borgeson. My guest today is a former FBI agent and whistleblower. Mark Crider's story is chapter 13 of former FBI Supervisory Special Agent Rosemary Dew's book, which is titled Your FBI: How the FBI Suppresses Whistleblowers to Hide FBI Scandals and Crimes. Crider's FBI career nosedived into a Kafkaesque nightmare after he reported that a supervisor had told him that it would be in his best interest to testify in the FBI's favor against a disabled FBI Academy candidate that the FBI was trying to get rid of. Crider knew the candidate was fit to be an agent because he had approved the candidate for duty. Crider not only refused to lie on the stand, he refused to keep his mouth shut about the strong-arming. What happened after that, only Crider can fully describe. But what his story exposes is a network of offices throughout the Justice Department that, when they see fit, operate as a well-oiled retaliation and cover-up machine. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
So let's start with whistleblowing on that agent in charge, Teresa Carlson. Talk about the disabled. He was a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. Talk about the disabled candidate and what was going on with you and him prior to you blowing the whistle.
So I was the supervisor of the cyber squad in the Milwaukee office at the time. And I had done numerous times when applicants were going through the process, they have to take a physical fitness test. And I was one of the people that administered physical fitness tests. It's pretty cut and dry, black and white. You either pass or fail. The clock doesn't judge you. So the applicant coordinator threw a packet on my desk, said, hey, schedule this guy for a fit test and, come back to me with the results. So I called him up. We scheduled a time to meet. I think we actually did it at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee Athletic Center, because I think it was in the wintertime when we first did his first one. And, I'm a trained observer. I was, I'm supposed to be an investigator at this point, and the kid shows up, and I'll use the term kid because I'm an old guy. But the kid shows up, and
his name
quickly
is Justin,
noticed.
Right, Justin Slavey.
Yeah,
he was young.
Want to throw
How
his
old
name
was
out
he?
there.
Oh, wow.
He was in his early to mid 20s, I'm guessing. At that time.
Actually, I want to name his name because this guy had amazing tenacity.
Oh, yeah. And especially when you understand his backstory. But anyway,
Yes.
He shows up. I quickly noticed that he has a prosthetic on his left hand. I'm like, okay, well, he's got a prosthetic on his left hand. Get out there, push-ups, sit-ups, run, and pull-ups at that time. So I put him through his paces. He's a former Army Ranger. He whipped through our fit test at that point like it was nothing doing. And I believe at the time he went through, pull-ups were we were tracking the data, but it wasn't a requirement in order to pass the test. But he actually changed his prosthetic in order to do the pull-ups to a hook, and did 14 pull-ups, basically one arm, because his prosthetic doesn't go below his elbow. Wow. So he basically was just using it for balance, which I don't think at the time I could have done 14 pull-ups with both my arms. So stormed through it. As I do with everybody, I told him, hey, if you have any questions about Bureau life, what it's like to be in the Bureau, about the Academy, anything like that, next time you're in the office, just ask to come down and see me. We kind of hit it off because, being former military, he's former military. I kind of, take the military guys. I like to go the extra mile to do whatever I can for them.
Navy, right? You were in the Navy.
Yeah, I spent 10 years in the Navy. So really nothing else other than I threw the paperwork on the desk of the applicant coordinator and gave him the scores. Each activity in the fit test is graded on a 1 to 10 scale with an aggregate score. You need to score so many points in each category, and you need an aggregate score in order to pass. He wasn't even close to the border of passing. He was well above that. And really, I think he stopped in one other time, and we sat down and had a discussion. I learned a little bit more about his career. He was an enlisted Army guy, had been an Army Ranger. And for the Army guys out there, I don't know all the Army stuff, tab wearers, tab bearers, but he was actually in a Ranger regiment. I think he had done 3 combat tours and was injured on his 4th tour. So pretty incredible story.
This was one tough guy, very tough guy.
Yeah, what a lot of people don't realize is that he was the team leader during the exercise where he was injured, and he was the medic. So it was a faulty flashbang. That's a whole nother lawsuit story with a company that was pretty shady, but when he pulled the pin, it immediately detonated. He never let go of the spoon, and basically didn't quite disintegrate his hand, but mauled his hand pretty good. As I said, he's the medic, so he is instructing his team what to do and to have them, formulate the first aid, initiate the emergency plan. And here's a kid that's 21, 22 at the time, and 2 hours later, he's at the hospital, and the doctor comes up and says, I need you to make a decision. We're going to wheel you into the emergency room or into the operating room. I can cosmetically make your hand kind of look like a hand, but it's not going to function, or I can amputate it and we can fit you with a prosthetic, and I think I can get you back to 60, 70% function. At 21, 22, I'm not sure I could have made that decision. He's like, cut it off, gets, healed.
This guy was a really tough, fit. The FBI should have been happy to have him.
Yeah, all-American, the all-American boy, just a great candidate. So, yeah, just.
So then what happened?
So he came in one other time. I think he was doing some kind of paperwork or update. We sat down, had a chat. Like I said, we went through all that. A number of months passed, and I'm a FBI, just as a little bit of background, I'm an FBI firearms instructor, an FBI defensive tactics instructor, an FBI tactical instructor, and one of about 50 in the history of the FBI, a master police instructor. So the applicant coordinator came down and said, hey, the guy that you ran through the fit test needs to do an occupational skills test, which I was like, what's that? I never did that in the process. And he explained that because of his prosthetic, he had to go over to Marquette University. And I quickly learned there are 247 job essential skills to being an FBI agent. Mr. Slaby was tasked with performing all 247 of those.
Did anybody else, any other candidate before him, was any other candidate before him tasked with that many?
No, never. I didn't even know there were 247 until all this broke loose.
Okay, so already this guy has a target on his back.
13 of those skills have to do with firearms. So I was asked to provide firearms because the occupational skills clinic over at Marquette didn't have guns. It's not a typical request. So I took what are called red handle guns, which are fully functional guns with the exception that they can't be fired. You can't load ammo in them and fire them. And they're painted bright red so that everybody knows they're a non-functioning weapon, and we use them in training all the time. So I went over to Marquette University. There's some misnomer about what I actually did, but basically some of the explanations on those skills are, the typical layman can understand. Point a gun at a subject with your strong hand, point a gun at a subject with your weak hand. There were a couple of them that the occupational therapist didn't understand what they were, asked me to demonstrate them. I demonstrated what they were talking about, and then Justin did it. My name doesn't appear on that at all. that he was cleared by the occupational therapy doctor that evaluated him. Mark Crider didn't have any input into that process.
Okay.
So he goes through that, passes that with flying colors, and eventually, like all applicants, he's granted a invitation to the academy and heads off to the FBI Academy. Probably week 2 of his academy experience, I called down, talked to his class counselor. It was kind of a habit of mine. Sit-ups and push-ups are somewhat subjective. You know, it's not subjective on the run. Here's the start line, here's the finish line. This is what the clock says. You know, the protocol for the way you do a push-up or the way you do a sit-up can be somewhat subjective. So I always like to call down to the academy and say, hey, what did my guy score on the fit test? And then I compare it. Am I being too critical or am I not being critical enough? You know, I scored him at a 12 and they scored him at an 18.
Oh.
Okay, I need to adjust what I'm doing. So I called down and I kind of got the 3rd degree from his class counselor. And I didn't, at that point, I didn't really understand.
On what? Like what was
just how he processed through, who made the, I'm like, I don't know. I did his fit test. That's the extent of my involvement in his application process. I didn't.
Now, in your mind, did that raise any red flags at the time?
No, because I'm still on Team America at that point.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
you know, I bleed, FBI red, white, and blue. You know, as cheesy as that sounds, but
No, I get it. I get
I'm
it.
a dedicated FBI agent. You know, in kind of the back half of my career at that point. So really didn't think anything about it. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, I'm at an in-service, a cyber in-service at the FBI Academy. And I sit down, and normally in the past, you always read who's at the academy because one of your classmates from the academy might be there for a different in-service. I didn't bother to do that. I don't know why, but the first morning I'm eating breakfast in the chow hall and Justin comes up and says hi to me and sits down. And he was kind of down in the dumps and I asked him what was going on. And he said he had been removed from training. And he wasn't really removed. What they did is they halted his training for medical reasons pending improvement of his medical condition, which was missing a hand.
What?
Yeah. So
well, wait a second. They accepted him into the academy knowing he didn't have a hand. So why does his hand all of a sudden, especially after he's passed all his fitness tests, why does that become an issue?
So I think, my opinion, this is Mark's opinion, but if they had actually done him for his inability to perform the tasks that he was asked to do, which was shooting a gun with his left hand or reloading or whatever, then that issue in employment parlance becomes an it's an OPM issue.
Well, it's a performance issue, right?
Right. And so that, it takes the jurisdiction away from the FBI and gives it to another governmental agency, and they oversee that. So instead, they put him on this medical thing, and that keeps it in-house so they can control it. And that, my belief is that's why they did it.
Okay.
So he tells me, hey, he's kind of down in the dumps. So I'm like, okay, well, why don't you meet me for lunch? And then after class, at 5 o'clock when I get out, let's go for a run. Just kind of keep the spirits up. We'd go for a run. We'd go get a beer at the wardroom at the academy. And, he kind of hung out with me. He was in limbo. He wasn't with his class. They had some stuff, some ancillary duties that he was doing, but it really wasn't keeping him busy and keeping him engaged. So we kind of, hung out, after 5 o'clock because I'm in class all day. And I really didn't think much of it. And on Friday I left, I tried to, keep your spirits up. This will pass. I think this is just an anomaly. Don't worry about it. like I said, at that point, I'm still on Team America, and I think, you know, I'm working for the greater good. I get back into my office on Monday morning, and I get called up to the ASAC's office, which is the #2 guy in the office. And I kind of get read the riot act for training Justin while I was at the academy. And when I met with the ASAC, I was kind of taken aback by this whole accusation, and I didn't really understand it. And
well, first of all, how did they even know you were with Justin?
Well, that's a good question. So during discovery, we find out that basically they were following me at the academy and keeping notes on me. And they already had notes on me from the first time that I talked to his class counselor asking how he did on his fit test. So I get read the riot act kind of by the ASAC. I go back to my desk, and while I'm sitting there, I'm getting irritated and don't really understand it. Then I get called into the SAC's office.
Special agent in charge. That's
which is
Teresa Carlson.
This is Nancy McNamara at the time.
Nancy McNamara. Okay.
And in some of these whistleblower cases, if you start digging, you'll find that name recurs on several of them. But she calls me into the office and starts reading me the riot act. And I said, what exactly am I accused of? I said, number one, I am authorized to train FBI agents in every discipline just about that they have. And number two, I didn't train him, and who's accusing me? And they wouldn't tell me who was accusing me or how they knew this or anything of the sort. I was just supposed to accept it and, you know, keep my head down and quit interfering with whatever they had going on. That was kind of the message that I got.
Which was getting rid of Justin, basically.
Yeah, in the long run, I think that's what they planned on doing.
Yeah, okay. And you were interfering with that plan.
Yeah, so kind of fast forward, Justin goes through the dismissal process, files an EEO claim, blah, 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 goes through the system.
EEO claim, meaning he feels like he's been unjustly let go.
Right.
Okay.
Which they said he wasn't. So then he filed a lawsuit. He is actually sent back to the Milwaukee office for a time where he's given a job within the office pending the completion of his EEO and
I understand he was at one point offered a janitorial job.
Yeah, they offered him some pretty demeaning jobs for, number one, a college graduate, number two, a guy that had been in the special agent pipeline.
Yeah.
So he's there for a while. He eventually goes back to Quantico, and I think he's stashed at the hostage rescue team for a while, helping them with logistics and stuff, which is something that he had done in the Army and was helping out. And so eventually one day I get called by the Chief Division Counsel, which is a FBI agent that's an attorney that acts as kind of the legal advisor for the office. I get called in saying, hey, you've been subpoenaed to testify in a civil case. It's Slaby v. Holder, which is the way, you know, it's done in the court system. And I said, well, I have some reservations about this, given what I've been subjected to at this point. What am I allowed to say? What am I not allowed to say? Blah, blah, blah. We make a phone call back to headquarters and get the Office of General Counsel on the phone. And I ask those questions. Hey, is this Mark Crider's opinion, or is this, you know, FBI? Is this Special Agent Crider's opinion that I'm supposed to regurgitate? Headquarters assures me, no, you just be truthful.
Both opinions in this case would have been the same, wouldn't they?
Yes.
Okay.
Just a definition of what.
What the parameters.
I didn't have the authority of saying he's good or he's not good.
Right.
You know, that wasn't in my purview. So have those questions. Like I said, I'm the supervisor on the cyber squad. So my direct report is the ASAC. I go up to tell the ASAC, hey, I'm going to be out of the office for a week, going to DC. He happens to not be in. He's out on something else. So I walk down to the SAC's office to let her know.
Special agent in charge, Teresa Carlson.
And now it's Teresa Carlson. go in to tell her, and I'm very generic. I said, hey, I'm going to be out of the office next week. This is who's going to be on the desk. If you need anything, well, where are you going? I said, I'm going to DC. What are you going for? I got subpoenaed in a civil trial. I'm trying to be as vague as possible. Well, what civil trial? Slaby v. Holder. Oh, why don't you come in my office? Because we're standing outside her office at the secretary's desk at this point. Go in the office, she closes the door, and basically she starts berating Justin for ruining his career, ruining his reputation, because he's fighting this dismissal. And that
What career is he going to have if he's being dismissed?
He's got a great career as a janitor.
Okay.
So I basically sit very quiet and listen to this. Teresa Carlson did not have a good reputation at that point. I wasn't going to cross her or anything in a one-on-one meeting with her. So I basically sat and listened. At the end of the conversation, she basically told me, hey, it would be in your best interest, because she knew I was looking for other jobs. It'd be in your best interest to come down on the side of the government. And I got up at that point. I was pretty uncomfortable with the conversation. I got up and I told her, hey, I'm just Joe Friday, nothing but the facts. That's all I'm going to present is the facts. So I leave her office. I'm so uncomfortable about this. And I think that I've just been involved in a felony.
Well, you've been told to suborn perjury, kind of, haven't you?
Yeah. And I believe it's a witness tampering. You know, I would, in one of my cases that I was going to court, I would have gone after whoever tried to do that.
That is witness.
Witness intimidation, whatever you want to call it. So I walked down to the Chief Division Counsel's office, tell her what transpired, and say, hey, I think this needs to be reported up. This is what I think, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, okay, I'll take care of it. I go down to my desk. The more I think about it, I'm like, yeah, this just stinks. And I think at that time I had 14, 15 years in the FBI, done, tons of cases. I sit down and write basically what our equivalent of an FD 302, which is a report of investigation. I write the entire episode up and save it onto my computer, and just for safekeeping. And I kind of got some advice from another individual in the office that was also an attorney. And I'm thinking it's getting reported up through the chain, through headquarters, through the Chief Division Counsel at that point. When I get to Washington, D.C., I meet with an FBI Office of General Counsel attorney and a U.S. attorney. And they're going to be in the deposition, because at this point it's a deposition with one of Justin's attorneys.
Now, at this point, have you already testified?
No. So this is my first involvement in his case at this point. Is they're taking depositions, getting ready to decide whether or not they're going to go to trial on this whole thing.
Okay, so Justin's lawyers?
No, so the Office of General Counsel and the U.S. attorney represent the FBI.
Oh, okay.
And then in the deposition is Kathy Butler, who is one of Justin's 3 attorneys. Eventually,
okay, so she's there too
in the lawsuit.
This is discovery for them, isn't it?
This is sworn testimony. You're sworn in just like you're testifying in front of the judge.
Right, but they're learning for the first time that you were told to basically say that Justin was not fit.
Well, so prior to walking in to this, I've testified in a lot of cases. Prior to walking in, I'm with the OGC and the U.S. attorney, and I tell him, hey, just so you know, this is what happened. I think that we need to turn this over to the other side, because I think this is exculpatory. It's
Brady material. Yeah.
Yeah. And they tell me, no, you don't understand civil matters. This is a civil matter, not a criminal matter. You don't have to say anything. And I said, well, just so you know, if I get asked a question, it's going to come out. And they said, as long as you tell the truth, don't worry about it. So we go through the whole interview, not really interview, but the whole process of me being interviewed by the U.S. attorneys and Justin's attorney. And she kindly gets to the last question to wrap it up and asks if I've talked to anybody about this. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I did. I talked to my direct report, the SAC, and she digs, well, what was that conversation about? And when I lay out what happened, she obviously goes high and right and just is like incensed. And she wasn't very happy when she found out that I had already briefed the other two on it and they didn't divulge it to her. So then there's a call for an emergency hearing in front of the actual judge that is going to hear the civil case. We go before the judge. I'm called to testify. The Chief Division Counsel is called to testify, and the SAC, Teresa Carlson, is called to testify. I obviously testify just like I just did here. The CDC, if you read the transcript, tries to do.
What is the CDC? Just tell.
The Chief Division Counsel, I'm sorry.
Okay.
If I get into, acronyms.
Chief Division Counsel, I will. He says what?
She says she is trying very hard not to tell the truth without lying. And fortunately for me, another one, John Griffin, which is another one of Justin's attorneys, is a supremely gifted, and I hate to give compliments to attorneys, but supremely gifted attorney, and basically gets the Chief Division Counsel to corroborate my story on the stand. And so that was very good for me. It solidified my reputation that I'm not a nut job and I didn't make all this
Teresa
up.
Carlson, was she forced to testify as well?
She was called to testify and she took the fifth, which I've never heard of that for an FBI agent. I don't know how you can take the Fifth Amendment being an FBI agent.
Well, you do that or you have to lie on the stand. So I think she thought that was the lesser of two evils, perhaps.
So she claimed that she didn't have enough time to prepare. She had the same amount of time that I did, didn't have enough time to prepare. They actually call her back like 2 weeks later. And on the advice of the section chief of inspection division, who is Nancy McNamara, she takes the fifth again and refuses to testify.
Now comes the cover-up machine.
Yep.
Getting in here. Yep. All right.
Yeah. So very, very strange. And then it just spirals downhill for me after that.
Well, around that time, you were going for a supervisory position, right?
I had started applying for a number of supervisory positions, and I kept getting not selected, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And about this time, I can't remember which hearing it was, but I still think I'm on Team America. I'm not the brightest bulb in the box, but I still think I'm doing. I think I'm doing the right thing, and I think
you weren't starting to get paranoid yet, Mark.
Not yet,
man.
And
okay.
So I get a call from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Hey, we're going to have a hearing. We'd like to do some trial prep with you. I've done trial prep before with U.S. attorneys. It's not a big deal. I go through, we go through whatever my testimony is going to be about, and they kind of, refine everything that we're going to ask. It's usually a one-on-one thing with the U.S. attorney that's going to be questioning me when I'm on the stand. I do kind of a Skype session, the FBI's, equivalent of Zoom. I'm sorry, we should say Zoom. We're on Zoom, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Skype too.
Okay. Hopefully I can get some kind of stipend for mentioning all this software. But I get on the call, and there are no less than 6 U.S. attorneys on the call, firing questions at me and going to the point where at the end of the session, I asked him, I said, am I a witness or a subject here? That's how.
What was the nature of the questions?
Basically trying to discredit my reputation, that I hadn't been selected for promotions, I hadn't gotten awards, I was disgruntled, kind of the whole gamut. I didn't know what I was talking about.
So, and were there any questions about your conversation with Teresa Carlson?
Limited
Okay.
conversations.
All right.
But they really, I think, were digging to come up with whatever kind of dirt they could find on me.
Okay, so at this point, what are you thinking? Are you thinking this
So-
might be connected to your complaint that's making its way up or whatever?
I haven't made a complaint at this point because like I said, I still think I'm a good soldier. I'm doing the
But
right
didn't you
thing.
do the 302? What did you do with
I
the?
did. I put that away just to kind of
Oh,
as kind of an insurance policy. And I can't remember at some point, I think after the I think I divulged that at the witness tampering hearing that I had recorded it on that, and I gave it up. And they did try, they were looking at the metadata in the document to see when it was made and if it was altered, and all kinds of things that they had done.
so do you think
that.
that's what triggered the multi-lawyer Skype session?
Yeah, I think at this point they knew that Justin's case was going to go to trial because he wasn't going to give up, and they needed to discredit me and any other witness that was going to testify on his behalf.
Okay, so you testify.
Yeah, so I can't remember if we had another hearing, but I end up getting subpoenaed for the trial. And during the course of their preparation for the trial, it then comes out that when they got a blotter from the supervisor at FBI headquarters. She had my name, most of my background, almost like a resume on me. And then she had also written an email detailing my activities while I was at the FBI Academy on that occasion that I met Justin at the FBI Academy, who I met with while I was there because I have friends that
So
were
they had
working at the
actually
FBI
started
Academy.
surveilling you.
Yeah, I hate to classify it as surveillance, but they were keeping tabs on me, on my comings and goings, and who I was going with. And I know that for a fact because one of my friends that I always meet with when I go to the academy got questioned by his section chief after I came to visit him, wanting to know why Justin was with me and what we talked about. And
Okay, all right.
so yeah, we go to the trial. The trial is kind of a standard trial. There's a lot of back and forth, wrangling, and as typical trials are. It was pretty egregious, because one of the main things that they were claiming is that he couldn't shoot left-handed. So his attorneys called him when he was called to testify, asked him if he would demonstrate shooting with his left hand with a red handle gun, and the government objected, and the judge allowed their objection. So he wasn't allowed to demonstrate to the jury at that point that he could fire the gun with his left hand. Fortunately, like I said, he had some pretty shrewd lawyers. During the course of other testimony from FBI Academy instructors, they brought up the fact that he couldn't shoot with his left hand. So once again, on rebuttal, they brought him up, and he actually he ended up getting to demonstrate in front of the jury that he could fire with his left hand. While I kind of stuck around, and the only question that from my understanding, the only question asked by the jury during deliberations was, how much money can we give him? So we had an inkling at that point, which way that was going to go. They didn't deliberate very long, and they said, yes, he will go back to the academy. There was some wrangling by the FBI, trying to drag their feet and stretch it out some more. And he eventually got back into the academy and passed through the academy without any issues. And he in fact, at this time, is an FBI supervisor at headquarters.
It's so interesting because the thing that I read about that trial was that they could only give him $75,000 because of, it was a government case or something. But the other thing that struck me, just to show how what dirty pool the FBI had played that the judge had perceived. The judge said that they could never get rid of him without this judge knowing, or there was some decision to that effect where the judge had to be apprised if there were any more movements to getting rid of him for any reason, which I thought was quite stunning for a judge to say. But okay, so now at this point you realize, when does Team America, when do you realize you are really not on Team America?
Well, so at that point, now I'm just mad because of the treatment I've been getting. In fact, I had a very colorful language conversation with the U.S. attorney that was handling Justin's case. Right before trial, he called me and asked if we could get together for some trial prep. At this point, I had gone to FLIOA, which is the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association. They have an attorney on retainer that advises agents in the event of a shooting or other disciplinary matters. I called and talked to him and I said, hey, what am I required to do at this point? Because I know I'm no longer on Team America at this point. How much cooperation do I have to give them? And he said, you don't have to cooperate at all. So when the U.S. attorney finally tracked me down and got me on the phone, there was some very colorful language from my end of the phone about what he could do with his trial prep and getting ready for trial, and what he had done to me previously.
Yeah, you weren't going to help him come at you.
No,
I mean,
not in the least. So subsequent to the trial, I filed an OPR complaint, which is the Office of Professional Responsibility, kind of like an internal affairs division in the FBI. I filed that complaint. They drug their feet on it, and they actually kicked it up because it involved an SES level position, a senior executive service, which is what the SAC is. They kicked it over to DOJ, the Department of Justice, and they opened up an investigation. And at the time this is all going on, I'm working in a pseudo undercover role in the Milwaukee office. They do their investigation. And I think I sent you that investigation, the first one, which is on Teresa Carlson. And basically they come out and support my claim that this is what she did.
But Teresa, I'm sorry, she lied her little you-know-what off to them.
Yeah, and it's pretty funny because they wouldn't give me to this day, they will not give me an unredacted version of that report.
Now, why is it that I know they redacted it, they said because of attorney-client privilege or something. But again, it's a specious and unwarranted reason, and yet they just get away with it.
It's a recurring theme. If you read through the book, they'll claim security concerns, or she was not being represented by any attorney within the FBI at that point. So there is no attorney-client privilege.
Right.
They just didn't want to share what she was saying about me because she didn't like me.
And then because there were two things to your what she had said, what you had said versus what she had said. And then when you were talking about the retaliation, not just in the office, but more importantly, every time you went to went for a supervisory position or another position, they would, come up with these ridiculous excuses as to why you weren't qualified. And I noticed that they had this system. It's so Byzantine when I saw that. This system of, okay, there are two things. The time, whether you're talking about retaliation against you in the form of not considering you for a job and saying you're not qualified for it. There's a timeline, did you go for the job after this whole thing had happened? And then there's this other thing that's super Byzantine called the car consideration or something like that. And I'm looking at this, and first of all, they're using Teresa's words, not yours. It's like what you had said, even when they say what you had said, it did not fully encompass that strong arming aspect of Teresa's conversation with you, which I thought was very interesting. You know, I mean, everything was kind of it seemed to be soft pedaled, you know. But the thing that also struck me was how there are all these offices, and the case goes to this office, and this office writes a report that's kind of mushy, and then it goes to another office, and then it was so confusing to me, the whole process
Yeah, so the way
of
that
your
that works
demise.
with the senior executive service is that DOJ Inspector General does that investigation, and they make no recommendations as to punishment or anything like that. They just kind of find, and if you read that report, it's very soft on. They didn't say she lied. They said, you know, maybe she didn't tell the truth exactly.
Well, and what they said was she showed lack of judgment and was unprofessional, as if that were the point. You know, the
Yeah,
point is, did this woman ask you to suborn perjury or not? That's what you're being asked to judge. Oh, well, she was unprofessional. Well, what does that mean? And then after Justin wins his case, well, she's still unprofessional, not, you know, having suborned perjury and
it's
lied.
unprofessional to lie.
Well,
I think we can all agree on that.
but unprofessional does not describe it properly. Okay.
Yes.
She lied. She asked you to suborn perjury so they could get rid of this guy. And that is completely soft pedaled throughout all this documentation. It was absolutely stunning to me.
Yeah, so they take her and move her to an equivalent, actually a little higher position back at FBI headquarters while this IG investigation is going on.
Why does that happen?
Because it's easier to move somebody instead of actually address the issue with them. But so the process in the FBI is once DOJ IG does their investigation, then they hand it back off to the FBI Office of Professional Responsibility. They see what misconduct is in there and what the guidelines are for punishment. Well, I know for a fact, so in the FBI, you have to have 20 years of service and be at least 50 years old in order to retire. At the time, Teresa Carlson was 49 years old. She had over 20 years in, but she was 49 years old. And remind me to tell you about all her stuff later. But so they move her back to headquarters. I know for a fact that the Office of Professional Responsibility then sat on that adjudication, waiting for her to turn 50. So once she turned 50, then they told her, hey, we're going to terminate you, but you have 10 days to rebut that. And in those 10 days, she retired. So she got a full retirement out of the FBI with no ill effects on her career.
Wow.
And once she retired, she filed a complaint, an EEO complaint against the FBI because she was investigated by the Office of Professional Responsibility 5 times. And she said they were going after her because she was a woman.
Oh, what were the 5 times about, I wonder?
Well, she'd been accused.
Suborning, trying to get Mark Crider to suborn.
No, she had, as a new agent, she had an affair with her married supervisor. She went back to FBI headquarters and then got promoted to FBI headquarters, went out to a field office and allegedly was sleeping with her supervisor in that field office. She'd been in the New York office and she was messing around with a guy that actually resigned from the FBI, taking him in a car.
Did this woman boink her way to the top? Is that what she did?
I wouldn't hazard a guess on that. I'll stay away from that.
Well, you just described it as described her.
But a lot
My
of
God.
just a big cloud around her entire career, and she had a reputation as, you know, not being competent and ability to do the job.
Right.
So once that one
Wow.
comes out, during the discovery process, I'm finding all this stuff out. So I actually file it, and I file an EEO. And as you talked about, your EEO complaints are, for instance, I filed one saying, hey, I found out, you know, that I was selected #1 for this job, but then they changed it because they were directed to by the front office, which is illegal. And they said, well, you're past the date that you can file an EEO because that happened so long ago. I'm like, well, how am I supposed to know about it? Because I don't get the recordings and I don't get,
Yeah.
you know. So I filed another complaint, and DOJ Inspector General did another report, which is the second one that I sent you. And
Yeah, I saw that.
you could kind of see in there, I'm finding out, hey, I'm selected first for this one, and they changed the order and I don't get it. And back when those were happening, I was thinking, man, I need to rewrite my stuff. I'm not doing a good job of presenting, you know, my qualifications. And it turns out it didn't have anything to do with that. It had to do with the fact that I was blackballed at that point and I wasn't going to get a job, you know, no matter what.
Carlson, though, she actually gave you a heads up on this, didn't she? I mean, didn't she tell you that you weren't going to go? What
I don't go along with the program, you're not going to get.
You're not going to be getting these better jobs. I mean, she actually told you that.
Yeah.
Did she tell you that before it started happening?
That was the threat in her office, but I didn't really, you know, I didn't take that seriously. I still believed in the system and that it was a fair and impartial system.
Well, you talked about the EEO offices being pretty corrupt. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's corrupt or incompetent, but in the EEO process, when you file an EEO, you have to meet certain deadlines and wickets in order for you to keep proceeding. And the EEO office doesn't meet any of their deadlines. So they just drag it on and on and on. And in fact, I had applied to be an EEO investigator for the FBI because at that point there was a point in there that I just started putting in for jobs to see how they would rank me down.
Right.
And one of them was an EEO position. And the person that sat on the board to decide who was going to get it was actually the EEO investigator doing my EEO investigation. And I'm like, how is that not a conflict of interest? Explain that to me. I'm like, that's why you think you're going nuts. When you interview all these whistleblowers, they will tell you at a point in time, you think that it's you that is crazy.
Well, I mean, certainly when your cootie factor was up in the office and you knew that people were kind of avoiding you and you know that you knew that you were in trouble, generally speaking, you know, that's the time when you start thinking about protecting yourself and wondering if the system is going to help you or whether the system is actually creating this cootie factor for you. My question to you is, who do you think, how far up I mean, this thing went up to Mueller and, you know, the highest levels of the FBI. Who do you think was doing all this? I mean, do you think it was just like, that's how the bureaucracy, like the way I described it, that's how the bureaucracy sort of protects itself? Each office behaves in a certain manner when somebody is causing trouble for the agency as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's a coordinated effort. I think there's tacit approval. And I had agents come to me, very seasoned agents senior to me that I very much respected, telling me, Mark, I'd never do what you did because of the way you got treated. And I think, it's kind of like in the old days when we vanquished the army, we cut their heads off and put them on a pike out in front of the castle to warn other people not to try and attack the castle. And that's really, if you read the recurring theme through all these whistleblower stories, that's what they do. They make your life so untenable that nobody around you is going to do that. And in fact, some of my closest friends were kind of, come on, Mark, I think you're exaggerating this a little bit, until they personally witnessed it. And then they're like, holy crap, this is what you're going through every day. And I said, yeah, every day.
So talk about some of the retaliation that you experienced.
Well, like I said, I was a firearms instructor. I was I was more qualified than anybody in the Milwaukee office at that point with firearms and all my training background. And so I put in, each office has a head firearms guy, head training coordinator. I put in to be the training coordinator. I thought, hey, this is a chance I can kind of get off in a corner. Nobody will bother me. I'll go do my thing. And this is a chance for me to kind of recover. And they selected a guy that had, a tenth of the qualifications that I had. And in fact, every other firearms instructor came up to me and were like, why didn't you put in? And I said, I did put in. I didn't get selected. So they were all shocked. I can tell you there's a passage in the story. The supervisor was out of the office. At this point, I'm still a relief supervisor, and I'm actually the acting supervisor for the day. One of the ASACs comes down, and our office at that time where I was sitting, we were all lined up. Our desks faced the window, and we were all in kind of single file line with a big counter behind us. And the ASAC came down, walked past another worker in the office, past me, past another desk, and down to the last desk, and said, hey, I have a question regarding this, 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 and this. And that agent told him, well, Mark's on the desk, you should ask him. That's his call. And he said, well, I want to know. And he's like, well, Mark's right there. And in fact, we could see each other from where, because I just kind of leaned back and looked. And he turned around and walked out of the office. And the person that was sitting on the other side of me pushed his chair back, and he looks at me, he goes, well, that was kind of awkward. and I'm like, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
This is what happens to me every single day. So I was probably doing 20 weeks of training a year in the Milwaukee division. That got cut down to almost zero. So they were taking things away from me.
Yep.
You talk to Mr. Kobus. I would come in the morning. Good friends of mine, we were in a private building, and good friends of mine had half the floor, about 3 floors above the FBI office in that building. And they gave me a key to their office. I would come in the morning, like to get to work early. I'd throw my coat on the back of my chair. I'd leave the FBI office, go upstairs, open their office, make coffee, turn on the lights, sit down, read the paper, wait for everybody to come in, have coffee with them, kind of commiserate with them until about 11 o'clock. I'd go back down to my desk, see if my workmates needed any help, and then go to lunch, come back and work out and go home, because they were not assigning me anything to do.
So let me ask you something. What effect agency-wide do you think this has when whistleblowers like you are treated this way? And then the second part of the question is, what effect does that have on the FBI's performance for the public who pays their salaries, pays everybody's salaries?
Well, I think it has the desired effect. I think it has a chilling effect. If you talk to any one of the whistleblowers, would I do it differently? Maybe there's some things I would do differently, but I wouldn't, most of the whistleblowers, it's intrinsic in their character as to, not that I'm touting that I'm, a saint, but I joined that organization because of fidelity, bravery, integrity. I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to help people. I wanted to put criminals in jail. And then when you see criminals within your own organization walk away from those things, it has a very chilling effect on you. And I think it has a chilling effect on the people that observe that around you. And like I said, they came to me and said, I'd never do what you did. I don't care what I see, I won't do it because I'm not going to go through what you went through. And I think that there is some validity to its design that way, so that they don't that keeps the troops in line, kind of that discipline, so that you don't get a lot of whistleblowing from the FBI.
Well, it also, and correct me if I'm wrong, it kind of makes me fear for big sensitive investigations and cases that the FBI does, because if agents allow themselves to be so easily pressured, so easily pressured into keeping their mouths shut or lie on the stand and so on, that's very scary when you think about the services that the FBI is supposed to provide to the public.
And it's a great question to ask other whistleblowers, but in my experience, it's kind of strange because it doesn't carry over into the investigative arena. All of these have to do with personnel issues. They're not investigative issues. Once in a while, you'll see a rare occurrence where a guy, is mishandling evidence or something like that. But you really don't, I never saw it in my career where guys would try and make something up in order to make a case. Now, would they make something up to get a promotion? In a New York second. But to alter a 302 on a case, that was the kiss of death. You'll get crucified for that. But if you lie on a career board, you're going to get promoted because you were loyal to the guy upstairs. So I never really saw it cross over in my experience. Now, other guys may have a different experience, but I didn't see that. It does worry me because, a career board is 3 supervisory special agents. Usually, if one of them is not a minority, then they have a minority observer that's non-voting, and then the ASAC and the SAC sign off of it. So it's not like you're just getting one person to say Mark Crider shouldn't be a supervisor. You're actually getting the 3 of them to do the bidding of the upper echelon for them.
Yeah, but the other problem I think I see, and we're running out of time, unfortunately, because this is very important. The other problem I see is that Mark Crider is a man of integrity. He wants to do things by the book, and he is a better candidate, not just in terms of his experience, but in terms of his integrity, because integrity all up and down the line, no matter what it is you're doing, is very important when you're in a huge law enforcement and legal environment, So that's what troubles me about your story. But
and I think it's a cultural thing within the FBI. And if you ask any FBI agent, do management and street agents get treated differently when they get into trouble? You will not find one. I would hesitate that you'll be able to find one that doesn't say, yeah, street agents get hammered and SESers get promoted.
Yep. Well, at the networks, I experienced that, so I can. All field people, as a producer, all field people, yeah, yes, and the field people are where the rubber meets the road,
Yes,
so,
and those are the guys out there, doing the hard work.
Yeah, taking the hits. That's right. That's right. Listen, I want to thank you for doing this. And, you know, I told Rosemary that I would like to have everybody in that book come and talk to me so that I can put all of this out there. I think it's very, very important. I think it's important for people to see people of integrity who were part of the FBI and also to see what the problems are. So I thank you very much for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. And hopefully we'll get some action by Congress and make some progress in the whistleblower arena.
I hope so. I hope so. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Thank you.
Take care.